Y'all knew it was coming, and I'm sorry for the wait. But now, here is the real greatest upset in March Madness history, and really basketball history. Although the UMBC upset was absolutely insane, UMBC ended up finishing 166 in KenPom. So here are some facts about FDU that makes this upset really unbelievable. FDU was never ranked under 300 in KenPom the entire year, meaning they were always one of the worst 60 teams in the country. They played in the NEC, or Northeastern Conference, which was by far the worst conference in the country. What makes that even crazier is they didn't win the conference regular season, they didn't win the conference tournament, and they were only in March Madness because Merrimack was ineligible for the tournament because of the awful transition rule. When a D2 team goes to D1, it takes them 5 years to finally become eligible for March Madness. If that rule never existed, this upset would have never happened. But it somehow only gets even crazier. FDU went 4-22 in the previous year, and this was Tobin Anderson's first year coaching Division I basketball. They had an average roster height of 6'1", which was the shortest team in the country by far, and they had the 5th worst defense in the country per KenPom. Now they were matched up against Purdue, who was one of the tallest teams in the country, led by the National Player of the Year, 7'4" Zach Edey. This Purdue team had some of the best non-conference wins in the country. They beat Marquette, West Virginia, Gonzaga, and Duke all to start the year. And even though things looked rocky in the middle of the season, they won the Big Ten Conference Tournament and looked like one of the best teams in the country. Coming into the game, the Boilermakers were 23-point favorites, and nobody thought FDU had a chance. Well, except for that one guy. So now let's answer the question. How did FDU pull off the biggest upset in March Madness history? When I was watching the film on this game, I found 5 main reasons as to why FDU was able to upset Purdue, so without any more waiting, let's get into that first reason. During this game versus Purdue, one of FDU's biggest points of emphasis was force the other guys to beat them. And this game plan isn't that uncommon. You want the worst players on the court to try to beat you, but it's the way that FDU ran it that I haven't really seen that often in high-level basketball. Instead of being 2 to 3 feet off a guy or daring a guy to shoot, they just wouldn't guard certain players. And part of this is because they had to. They needed an extra guy by Zach Edey. But let's see what happens with the Purdue role players when they are tasked to try to beat FDU. The 3 guys on Purdue that FDU dared to make plays were Brandon Newman, Caleb First, and Ethan Morton. And I want to look at Brandon Newman first because he played absolutely awful. His decision making and processing speed was extremely poor, and we see an example of that on one of the first possessions of the game. We see his man 1 pass away, and usually the man would be right around here, but because he has to help on Zach Edey, he has 2 feet in the paint. The ball gets swung to Newman, and he now has a long closeout to attack, but he does nothing. He does a pump fake and a jab step, and the defense has completely recovered. Purdue did get an open shot on this possession that they missed, but imagine if Newman was able to get downhill and force this defender to step up. If he just put the ball on the rim, Edey would have went to go get it. A couple minutes later, Newman finds himself in that same position as off the ball screen his man tags Edey, so when he lifts, he has all this space to operate. This time he does win the closeout, but he settles for a bad shot, and let me explain why this is a terrible shot. After a good pump fake, he has all this space to operate, and FDU's rim protector isn't worried about contesting a shot, he's more worried about position on Zach Edey. It looked like the Red Sea parted for him. He could have easily drove this and floated it or laid it up or dumped it to Edey. He could have done anything except for this bad shot. Luckily, Purdue was able to get the offensive rebound, but on the very next possession, Newman has the same issue. Again, his man stays to help on Edey, and this time when he has a long closeout to attack, he wastes 2 dribbles, picks the ball up, and throws it away. He didn't look comfortable with the ball, and he didn't look like he wanted to make decisions, and this play ended up getting him benched. He gets put back into the game a couple minutes later, and on the next long closeout, he literally does nothing. No jab step, no pump fake, no dribble. He just looks panicked and not comfortable. But I think his worst moment of indecisiveness came at this moment in the game. Not only is he not in triple threat and falling back, but he's completely telegraphing this pass, and that's the last time we saw Newman for a very long time in this game. Now with Ethan Morton and Caleb Furst, it's a little different than Brandon Newman, because FDU wanted them to shoot so badly. Caleb Furst isn't a shooter, so FDU didn't even have to worry about not guarding him, and they dared Ethan Morton to beat them from 3. Morton ended up going 0 for 2 in this game, and after that, FDU had no reason to respect his shot, so anytime him or Furst were on the court together, it was essentially a 5-on-4. If I'm being honest, Purdue outside of their main 4 guys were completely awful in this game. They collectively shot 2 for 8 from the field and were a combined -21 while in the game. But no one on this Purdue team gets an excuse for this game. It was that embarrassing. The next reason FDU pulled off the upset is because they relentlessly attacked Zach Edey on the defensive end. And FDU wanted to make that an emphasis. They wanted Purdue to know that, yeah, we're coming after your best player. We're coming after the National Player of the Year. For their first 3 offensive possessions, it was whoever Edey was guarding, either come get the ball and go to work or come set this screen. And I think it was this mindset that really set the tone for the entire game. Even on this possession where they don't score on Edey, they want it to be known we are attacking your best player, he can't just chill at the rim. The very next possession after they missed that shot, they play hot potato for about 20 seconds until they find who Edey is guarding and they tell him to go to work, and the result is a 3. And the best success FDU had when it came to attacking Edey was in a high ball screen. The higher the screen was set, the better, because Edey was in drop coverage, so if the screen was set at half court like in this possession, look at all this space that the FDU player has, and it's a wide open 3 for target practice. I think this game is one of the reasons why Zach Edey won the National Player of the Year in 2024 and why he's been such a good NBA player. This game exposed his lack of lateral quickness. Some of these plays just look like he's in quicksand. Yeah, he's there, but he's just a 7'4" cone. He's not disrupting anything on the defensive end. Take this possession for example. Braden Smith reaches and Edey's on the left side, so the FDU guard decides to reject the screen. Now because Edey had a lack of lateral quickness, he has to flip his hips to try to cut the guard off. When the guard stops on a dime and gives the ball back to his big, Edey's caught completely off balance. Ethan Morton sees that Edey's off balance, so he tries to stunt at the big, and the result is a wide open layup. And if you were the Purdue coaching staff, what would you do schematically? Dimitri Roberts is 5'8". That's a 1.5 feet smaller than Zach Edey. If you give him all this open space and allow him to get downhill, he's going to make Edey look like a fool. But here's the thing about Zach Edey. If you put him in a pick and roll, he's tall enough, long enough, and smart enough where he can guard 2 players at once. But what happens if instead of telling that 5-man to roll to the rim, you tell him to pop out? Now Edey has more space he needs to cover, and he's not laterally quick enough to cover that space. And this is what FDU figured out. So throughout the game, whenever they needed a good look, they would run the pick and pop and they would get a good look. And I know they've missed all the shots that I've shown on the screen, but you know why it doesn't matter? It doesn't matter that they missed all these shots, because in the biggest moment of the game, they called their go-to play. They knew that if they put Sean Moore in a pick and pop just one more time, Zach Edey would not be able to contest the 3 and he would hit a dagger of a shot.
4 straightaway 3. It's good!
But let's backtrack just a little bit, because there's still 3 more reasons as to why FDU was even in this position. And the next thing from this game to look at is FDU's run and jump press, but more importantly, their relentless pressure that they put on Purdue for the entire 40 minutes. This pressure wasn't something that was uncommon for FDU. They pressed 38.5% of defensive possessions, which was second in the country. But what was pretty uncommon was for it to work this well, especially against a team of Purdue's caliber. Purdue had 16 turnovers compared to 15 assists in this game, and to say they looked unlike themselves would be an understatement. They were visibly uncomfortable for the entire game. And the 2 players on Purdue that really struggled and let this pressure bother them were Fletcher Loyer and Braden Smith. Fletcher Lawyer ended the game with 3 turnovers, 1 assist, shooting 40% from the field, while Braden Smith finished the game with 7 turnovers, 6 assists, and he shot 20% from the field. And it makes sense, they were both true freshmen and they got sped up and let the moment get to them. But let's get back to the FDU press. I really like this pressure package because of the randomness of it. Sometimes they would unleash the dogs and go full out blitz and trap and deny every pass hoping for an immediate steal, but sometimes they would just stunt and jab, just playing mind games with Braden Smith. And this randomness could either be two things. It could start with the coaching staff where they have a specific word like fire, and if that word gets called, then it's a full on go. Or it could have been totally up to the players and they just had to trust each other and move as a collective unit, knowing when someone would stunt and when someone would full on go. And what makes this trap even more fun is it wasn't only a full court thing. They would sometimes do it in the half court to try to catch Purdue off guard. The turnovers are cool, the pressure is cool, the missed shots are cool, but the one thing that this press did that won FDU the game is it kind of took Zach Edey out of the game. Zach Edey only got 11 shot attempts in this game, while Braden Smith, Fletcher Lawyer, and Mason Gillis all got 10 apiece. This pressure made the perimeter players of Purdue forget that they had the best player in the country sitting on the block every possession. And the stats really don't do it justice, because even on possessions like this where FDU doesn't force a turnover, they force a quick ill-advised shot that only helps their chances of winning the game. But here's my favorite part about the trap. Here's why Tobin Anderson is one of my favorite coaches in college basketball. Throughout this game, FDU gave Purdue 4-on-3s and 3-on-2s. They purposely gave Purdue an advantage, because in the same manner where they forced guys to shoot open shots, they forced Purdue's non-playmakers to make plays. Take this possession for example. They all out blitz Braden Smith and deny Fletcher Lawyer. The outlet pass that's wide open is Mason Gillis. Mason Gillis has a 2-on-1, and this FDU defender is not going to leave Zach Edey, so if Mason Gillis can make a play, they'll get a bucket. But he can't make the play, and this is what happened throughout the game. Purdue's secondary guys offered Zach Edey absolutely no help. This was truly beautiful to watch, and now I see why Tobin Anderson said the more I watch Purdue, the more I think we could beat them. He knew all he had to do was manufacture a way to turn Purdue's secondary guys into their primary guys. So now let's get into the last two reasons as to why FDU won. Their ability to be physical with Zach Edey and not allow him to get easy post touches. And this does build on the other reasons I listed previously. Because FDU left some of Purdue's players wide open and they sped Purdue's guards up, they could send extra help to Zach Edey. And this is how they guarded Zach Edey. They would always have someone behind him and they would always, and I mean always, front the post. If they didn't front the post, well, this would happen. And remember when I said FDU was the smallest team in the country? The two players they had primarily guarding Zach Edey were 6'7" Ainsley Almanor and 6'6" Cameron Tweedy. The reason they were able to somehow hold 7'4" Zach Edey is because they got in his legs every time and pushed him whenever they could. Every time Edey went to post one of them up, they would squat in the deepest squat they've probably ever squatted in, and they would try everything in their power to not allow Edey to get an inch of interior position. What's also noteworthy is they would angle their body to the sideline, trying to get their forearm into Edey's back or even hip or even butt, just trying to push him off of his spot. Now you might be wondering, well, that looks like a foul. They were just fouling Edey the entire time? And the answer to that is yeah. That was the last part of FDU's game plan. Just foul Edey as much as possible, and if the refs call it, they call it. If they don't call it, we're gonna keep trying to see what we can get away with. And I'll be honest, FDU did get away with a lot of foul calls during this game, especially on Edey. But I don't blame FDU for doing this. If I was the smallest team in the country and I'm trying to upset the #1 seed, I'm trying to find any advantage possible, and if the ref isn't blowing the whistle, that's not my problem. And I think the reason FDU was able to get away with so much physicality and straight up getting away with fouling them is because the game was played so fast. There was always so much happening and so much congestion inside the paint that sometimes the refs just happened to miss the call. This was a game where FDU was really able to wear down Purdue. It felt like Purdue collapsed mentally, physically, and emotionally. This bucket put Purdue up 47-41 with just under 12 minutes left, and since that moment, Purdue only scored 11 points for the rest of the game and allowed FDU to claw their way back into the contest. For FDU to win this game, everything had to go wrong for Purdue, and that's what happened. They didn't shoot the three ball well, they turned the ball over, they didn't get the ball inside, they played at a sporadic pace, and they let FDU be the aggressors in this game. And looking back on it, I think this game was the best thing that could have ever happened to Purdue basketball. Everyone on Purdue learned from this game. Their coaching staff learned that they needed to get better guards if they wanted to compete in March, and then they brought in Lance Jones and made the national championship a year later. Zach Edey went from a 7'4" traffic cone to someone that could actually move his feet well enough to be a much better defender. And Braden Smith used this learning lesson to become the best point guard in the country. And the way it's looking, I think Purdue should be the favorites heading into this 2026 season, and this is the best shot they've ever had to win a national championship. So, I hope you enjoyed the video. I had a lot of fun making this. I love all y'all, and I'll catch y'all in the next video.